Most of us will have about 450 periods in our lives. It's one of the most miraculous things happening every month without us even blinking an eye. Making healthier choices at least 80% of the time can and will regulate your menstrual symptoms. 71% of girls develop depression or anxiety within the first 2 years of being put on an oral contraceptive. They do not know what their bodies are like not being on an oral contraceptive pill. The oral contraceptive changes the kind of partner we are interested in.
Welcome to Smulcast, where we help you live a healthier and fuller life. Today we're going to be discussing the mysteries of the menstrual cycle. There are quite a lot of misconceptions about the menstrual cycle, and so we'll be discussing what a normal cycle looks like, how the pill can influence it, and practical ways that you can have a positive impact on your cycle. So whether you're looking to better understand your own body or looking for ways to alleviate monthly symptoms, this is the episode for you. We're joined by Dr. Ledivia Strauss. It's so wonderful to have you here with us. She's a medical doctor focusing on hormonal health. Ledivia, can you just start by telling us why you do what you do?
Thank you, Tracy. It's such a privilege to be here, and it's a topic I feel very passionate about because I think it's something that is not talked about often enough, or women don't understand all the nuances around it, and not only women, but also the men in our lives. Because even for the men listening today, thank you very much for taking the time. You'll have a sister or a wife or a girlfriend or a mum that goes through this monthly, because all women around the world will have at least one menstrual cycle in her life. So my struggle with my menstrual cycle actually started because I didn't start my cycle with my peers around 12 or 13 years. I only had my first period when I was about 14 or 15 years old, so that already was something to me that was, I felt a bit off. I had a wonderful supporting mother. She explained the birds and the bees to me and that I would have a cycle, but we didn't really understand the whole hormonal shift that's happening and why I am experiencing some symptoms, because also I didn't have this perfect, regular, normal cycle as we all expect it to be. She took me to a gynecologist because I was almost bleeding month through and there was no regular cycle. And lo and behold, the gynecologist put me on an oral contraceptive pill because she wanted to regulate my cycles. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it probably was the best thing at that stage or the best of her knowledge. But after doing what I'm doing now for years, I realized that I wasn't educated on the risks associated with the oral contraceptive pill. She didn't ask very specific lifestyle questions or go into any details about what is supposed to be happening in my body. I was just given this pill and told I should use this for the next 3 to 6 months, come back for a review or to get my new script. I started taking this pill because the doctor told us to do it and it's going to regulate my cycle. And being a 15-year-old girl, I already had a lot of struggles, as you know. We have all these changes in our bodies, body image, and I picked up a lot of weight to the point where my mum told me, listen, let's just flush these pills down the toilet and we'll deal with it as we go along. And obviously the pill did not heal my irregular menstrual cycles, but I was able to cope and manage it until only later years studying medicine and understanding what's actually supposed to be happening in my body, making certain lifestyle changes, and ever since I've had a perfectly normal regular cycle without an oral contraceptive pill. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and we might go deeper into the nuances around this question, but that is why it's something that I take time to explain to my female patients, to tell all my friends with daughters to please explain it to them, and also my friends with boys. They also need to educate their boys on how to best support the girls in their lives to really understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And I love that your own personal experience has influenced your passion for this topic, because it is able to filter down to so many more patients and people, which is incredible.
I think all of us working in this integrative space of medicine have got our own stories, and
100%.
That's why we do this.
100%. So then let's go back to what a normal cycle should look like. Let's start there. So can you just outline for our listeners what a normal cycle should look like? What are the different phases?
Yes. So a normal menstrual cycle is normally divided into 4 phases. It's actually 2 big phases, the follicular and the luteal phase, but we call it 4 phases because there is the menstrual cycle where we actually bleed. And that's quite surprising how few women know that the first day of their cycle is the first day of their bleed.
Yes. Yeah.
So you will see it in practice also when I ask patients whether on their cycle, they look at me quite, what am I asking now? So day 1 to 5 normally is what we call menstruation, and that's where we have our bleed. And that is then part of the follicular phase, the first 14 days of the cycle, where the body is getting ready to develop this mature follicle to release an egg. Because the menstrual cycle, as you know, is the body's way of helping us to reproduce and not become extinct as a species. Obviously, we do not want to fall pregnant every month, and luckily it doesn't happen like that every month. So we have the follicles that are being stimulated in the first 14 days. Ovulation takes place about between day 10 to 14. And then is when the luteal phase starts. So from day 14 to 28 is normally the luteal phase, where the uterine lining is being built up to receive that implantation of the fertilized egg to carry a pregnancy. So for all of that to happen, we have these wonderful messengers in our brain sending signals to our ovaries to tell them which hormone to produce when. And if you really go into the detail of the menstrual cycle, it's one of the most miraculous things happening every month without us even blinking an eye. So the hypothalamus is a little gland in the brain sending signals to the pituitary gland. So that starts happening around puberty, anything between 10 to 16 years. But as you know, puberty is starting even earlier now in girls, and that is also why I feel we need to really educate them, because not all of them are emotionally mature enough for all these changes happening, but it's happening. But if they at least understand what's happening and why it's happening, they can better understand and manage this.
Completely.
So from around puberty, the hypothalamus starts squirting out gonadotropin releasing hormone to the pituitary gland to make FSH and LH. The FSH and LH is being produced in a cyclical fashion, giving messages to the ovaries, to the granulosa and the theca cells to make either estrogen or progesterone, and then also testosterone mid-cycle. So this happens in a perfectly cyclical fashion between estrogen and progesterone doing this dance, almost like an ECG. It reads like an ECG.
Yes.
And if it's happening in this perfectly cyclical fashion, we have normal, regular, mostly 28-day cycles. A normal cycle is anything between, say, 21 to 35 days, but it's mostly probably 28 days, more or less, because we ovulate around day 14. And it's when these hormones are not talking to each other in a cyclical fashion, or when the messages from the brain to the ovaries are not the way they should be, that we start seeing menstrual irregularities. So this is just, in a nutshell, what's happening to most women every month. And as we've discussed just now, earlier before we started, most of us will have about 450 periods in our lives. And that's quite a lot, so we need to really start understanding what's happening in our bodies to support it.
Absolutely. When I looked that up as well, I mean, that equates to, I think it was something like 3,500 days of menstruating in our lifetimes, which is a crazy amount of time, right?
And the men in our lives expect us to just manage everything and go about it like there's nothing going on, but it's something quite significant. It's magic, it's miraculous, it's beautiful, but we need to give it more credit than we are at the moment.
Absolutely. And for ourselves as well, we hold ourselves to quite high standards consistently, even though we're having all these fluctuations.
Definitely, because as we talk now with this hormonal fluctuations, it's not just the bleeding that's happening, it's all the psychological symptoms going with the hormone fluctuations and why we feel different in different stages of our cycle, but we can get into that.
We can delve into that just now. So maybe let's touch on what you had mentioned at the beginning around the contraceptive pill and how that then influences what's happening in our cycle. So can you just explain what the pill is doing to our cycle and menstrual patterns?
Yes. Firstly, I am not bad-mouthing the pill. I'm not against the oral contraceptive pill. I just feel that we need to have better education around it, and for doctors to really take informed consent from their patients before they just give them a script. I'm sure you see it in practice so often that we have girls coming in their reproductive years where they got married now, they're ready to start with a family, but they've been put on a pill since the age of 12. They do not know what their bodies are like not being on an oral contraceptive pill. So let's backtrack a bit. So what is the oral contraceptive pill? It literally changed the way us as females can control our bodies and control our fertile periods, and then also take part in the working cycle like men do. So we could go into corporate jobs, we could live our dreams, take our dream jobs, go on holiday when we want to, and not being always having to think about the menstrual cycle or having this fear of falling pregnant, because that is what the oral contraceptive is meant for, to be used as a contraceptive method. It has been discovered obviously later on that it masks many symptoms, so that's why it's been blindly prescribed for polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, heavy periods, without even asking any questions around it. It's just, and that is the problem that I have with the oral contraceptive pill. It's being used out of its context. If you give it for contraception, then perfect, but at least explain to the lady that a contraceptive bleed is not a real menstrual bleed. And you know how many practitioners don't even realize that when I have this discussion with them, because they tell me, no, but this girl has a perfect menstrual cycle. No, she has a perfect pill bleed. Because what the oral contraceptive, most of them does, 90% on the market, has a steady hormone production or hormone amount that they give you. It's ethinyl estradiol with a progestin, an artificial progesterone component, and it gives your body what it needs. The amount of hormones is so high that it blocks that messenger signaling from your pituitary gland. So your FSH and LH is not going to squirt out the messages to your ovaries to make your own hormones. So no, you are not making any of your own natural hormones while you are taking an oral contraceptive pill. You are getting the hormones from the pill that you are taking. Nowadays we have one or two options available that's a little bit more non-synthetic or has got estrogen that's a little bit closer to the body's estrogen, but it's still giving the body what it needs and suppressing the body's own ovulation, because it's blocking ovulation, so it's blocking hormone production. The oral contraceptive pill tends to really deplete us of certain of our very important minerals and vitamins, as you know, magnesium, zinc, selenium, vitamin B6, 9 and 12. It's been proven that it depletes some women. So at least educate and tell her that she will need to either supplement or improve her diet. The oral contraceptive pill needs to be metabolized through first phase cytochrome P450 liver enzymes. So if the liver is not being supported, if the liver is not functioning properly, she is really not doing her body a lot of service without supporting that. So as you can see, it's something that I feel quite strongly about, not because I'm against using it for the reason it was created, but it's when it's just being used to mask symptoms. And my last point on this is, women or girls are often told, no, but I'm giving you this to cure your PCOS. I'm giving you this to cure your endometriosis. An oral contraceptive pill will not cure anything. Yes, it's part of my treatment plan. It's a treatment option. It is being given to girls that have debilitating menstrual symptoms that really prevents them from functioning normally. Yes, then please use it in your treatment protocol, but don't tell her that it's going to cure anything, because it simply won't. And another point is, it is quite fascinating when I went into the research, is the oral contraceptive changes the kind of partner we are interested in. So often, and it might sound funny, but it's so true, we fall in love with a man when we are on an oral contraceptive, we get married, and then when we decide to have kids, we go off the oral contraceptive and now suddenly I don't find him attractive anymore, or certain traits in him really irritate me, and it's been proven in science, it's not just airy-fairy.
Yeah.
And on a more serious note with regards to mental health is that, and that's a scary statistic, it's from a Swiss study, 71% of girls develop depression or anxiety within the first 2 years of being put on an oral contraceptive. And if I have this discussion with mums coming in with their daughters or with young females coming to see me, I ask them if they have been educated, or I often ask them, do you feel anxious quite often, or do you find yourself being more depressed than in your younger years? And they almost look at me like I have a glass ball.
How did you know?
Yes, but it's 71%. That's a scary statistic to not take into account when prescribing these medications.
Yeah. I think that's the key point, is being provided the information so that you can then make an informed decision around it, and they absolutely have their place, but 100%. Know the information and know what you might need to manage and look at if you are on the pill. I think that's really, really helpful.
Yes.
And just to touch on what you had said about the bleed not being a true bleed as well, that a true period bleed is only after ovulation has happened.
100%, and the pill blocks ovulation. That's the way it works.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's some really important information to share. So thank you for sharing that. If we now look at someone that is not on any kind of hormonal contraceptive and they're wanting to understand their cycle a little bit better, there's obviously the method of tracking that they can use. And I know for myself as a doctor, when someone comes to see me as a patient and someone has been tracking, it's wonderful because it's this fifth vital sign that
100%. I love that you say that.
Get all this information from. So tell me a little bit about cycle tracking, why it's important, and how women can actually start doing that.
That is a very important point, and it's something that's really helpful for the woman herself, but also for her practitioner providing information. And also for her partner, for him to understand her mood a little bit better. So there are various methods of tracking your menstrual cycle, either by just writing your symptoms in a journal, getting a calendar, marking your day one, the first day of your bleed is your day one, and then tracking your symptoms from your mood, how you interact with people, how you handle stress, how your sleep is, how your body feels, how your weight is, how your gastrointestinal system is functioning, because also our microbiome changes throughout the cycle. So either you can just write the symptoms down in a journal, but nowadays we've got wonderful apps available, and I'm going to name them. We're not sponsored by any of them, but I find them quite helpful. It's the Clue app. There's a free and a paying version. The Flow app, and then also the Apple one that's on the Apple Watch. It's so easy and it's quite fun to use. So they've got these little emojis where you can mark your symptoms. You can write the symptoms you experienced before your period, during your period, after, and that gives us a lot of information, because then we can diagnose something like a premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Or is it just normal PMS? Does this patient need support in phase 1 or 2 of a detox? Or there are so many things that we can get from tracking symptoms, and I find it really helpful also to explain to your partner that in the first half of your cycle, especially from day 3, we feel amazing. We feel like a rock star. We feel pretty, and it's estrogen starting to rise. That's just our wonderful female hormone. If you want to pick a fight with somebody, do it in that stage.
Choose your moment.
Choose your moments. Do not pick a fight with a lady in the last half of a cycle, and don't disregard how she's feeling. Oh, you're just hormonal. Oh, is it that time of the month again? No, it's not as simple as it's that time of the month again. We really have hormonal fluctuations that really influence our brain health, our neurotransmitters, and how we feel and how we perceive our bodies. And also how our bodies operate. So if you understand your body better as a female by tracking your symptoms, you can really also guide the people around you that love you to also better understand.
Absolutely. I think I'd read somewhere that some of the apps have now got the capability to allow partners to join onto the app, which is really amazing.
I've heard that, and it's really helpful. And also for people that prefer not to use contraceptives, they can then use a natural method because they're tracking. We know that we are fertile An egg only lives for 24 hours, but sperm lives for about 5 days. So obviously we are fertile 5 days before, on the day of ovulation, and 24 hours after. So it can be then also used as a contraceptive method.
Completely. So you've mentioned some of the things that we can track when we are in our cycle, the various things that can impact it. Let's chat around some of the daily choices that we make and how those can impact our menstrual health. So maybe you can just start by touching on what the latest research says around how our diet and lifestyle impacts our cycle.
Doing research for this episode, it was very interesting to find a couple of research papers on how it's been proven in science that lifestyle choices, especially our dietary choices, our sleep and our exercise really influence our menstrual cycles. And I know there are people that really go into the detail and the nuances of when should we do strength training, when should I rather focus on yoga, and there's definitely a place for that, but I also don't want this to become another burden on a woman. Don't let this rule your life. I mean, it's easy to say, listen, you're not allowed to take an important decision in the week before your period. But what if it is that week that you have to take that decision? That's the week where I have to be on the podcast. That's the week where I have to do the presentation. We don't all have the liberty to rule and regulate our lives around our cycle. But just know that our daily habits and the things we do daily really influence our cycle. And often by taking a thorough history from my patients, I can get so much, and they often say, but how do you get all of this just by asking about my menstrual cycle? So often I would ask them, are you constipated? Have you not been eating so well lately? And they say, what, how are you not? But you are complaining about severe PMS. Your periods are much heavier. Your periods are longer. Then I know that the detoxification pathways were a bit overloaded, so she didn't eat that well. She didn't sleep that well. She, like I say, that she was probably constipated, so the hormones are being recirculated in the body. So by making healthy choices throughout our cycle, we can really influence how our hormones are being produced. And that's the other thing patients often tell me, but yesterday I had a healthy meal. It's not something you do yesterday that will influence today's hormones. Remember, hormones are being produced in a cyclical fashion, in a 28-day cycle. So you need to be almost perfect for the whole 28 days to really influence our cycle. But from my own experience, I can assure you that making healthier choices at least 80% of the time can and will regulate your menstrual symptoms. Obviously with other support from certain supplements that we can talk about. But something that is also important to remember, that week before your menstrual cycle, after you've ovulated and implantation didn't take place now, you will have what we call PMS. You will feel a little more down. You will feel a little bloated, a little bit more moody. And that is unfortunately also when we crave a little bit more of the carby or the starchy, sugary foods. Don't be too hard on yourself and try to avoid everything. Be lenient and allow yourself to have that bowl of ice cream or have that one sugary meal if it will make you feel better. And also don't take that week to train for a marathon. Know that in a week's time you will feel strong and healthy again. So do the more harder parts of your exercise routine in the first 3 weeks, and in that last week focus on Pilates, yoga, some stretching or some lighter forms of exercise, and do not be too hard on yourself if you don't reach all your goals in that stage of your cycle.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, just to have that knowledge so that you can be aware of it, and to aim for consistency rather than perfection.
100%.
I know we'd chatted a little bit about this before, but I think if you could maybe share the clock analogy around some of those changes that you can make in your life. Can you just share that?
Yes, I once attended a talk by Dr. Grant Ferrie, and he explained how our body can be seen as a clock. And I find this analogy quite helpful with my patients to almost convince them to make healthy choices. So if we look at a clock has got 3 arms. It's the second arm, the minute arm, and the hour arm. All 3 of them are equally important. And in our lives, the second arm equates to our daily habits. So what time you wake up, what you do when you wake up, how you handle stress, how you go about your daily exercise routine, what you eat, who you interact with. every little choice you make every day is your second arm ticking over, telling your minute arm, your months, how they will be. And how our months are will actually dictate how our hour arm, our years will be. And when we realize that, we will respect how important each daily choice is. Why should I rather opt for the healthier salad than the takeaway meal every day? Or why should I maybe opt to rather have this drink than that drink, or maybe stop alcohol, or maybe all these little changes, because how our habits are every day, our second arm will dictate our months, and that will actually dictate our years. And that's equally important for males as well. It's not just for females. And when we realize my daily choices are actually influencing the trajectory of my aging process, then I will be so much more motivated to make healthy choices daily than waiting for one day for everything to be perfect, and only then will I start making healthy choices.
Yeah, such a beautiful and helpful analogy. I love that. Let's get into some of those practical changes. So if we talk about dietary changes and nutrition and how that impacts the cycle, can you just run us through how our nutrition and diet does have an impact on our cycle?
The first part of the cycle is quite inflammatory. That is then when we bleed, when we get rid of the uterine lining. And in that stage, actually all through the stage, but in that first week specifically, an anti-inflammatory diet is really helpful. So in general, it equates to a diet that is free from ultra-processed foods and free from refined sugars and carbohydrates, and focus on the healthier, more nutritious whole foods that's anti-inflammatory and also high and rich in omega-3s. So our olive oil, sardines, trout, salmon, avocado, having an abundance array of fruit and vegetables, and also fiber. Fiber in females are even more important than in males because it helps us detoxify all these hormones. And as females, we need a minimum of 21 grams of fiber in a day. And if we can get up to 35 grams, it's first prize. Fiber gives the food for our gut microbiome to really switch certain genes and processes on and off, and to help us metabolize all these metabolic end products. So diet really, really and truly influence our menstrual cycle and how we will produce hormones. And since I have started focusing on eating a healthier, more anti-inflammatory diet, I literally have 0 PMS or 0 menstrual problems. And I see this in most or all of my patients, specifically working with the polycystic ovarian syndrome patients, where they often have a defect or a slower working glucose metabolism, and they run quite high on insulin. So putting them on a lower sugar diet and more whole foods, giving them that steady state of blood glucose, it really, really influences a healthier hormone production all over.
That's really helpful, and I do see it in clinical practice all the time. It's so beautiful to see when someone implements those changes. Are there any nutrients that you find particularly helpful for menstrual health as well?
Yes, definitely. As you know, vitamin D is extremely important, not just for menstrual health, but for all over. But vitamin D is also, it's actually a pro-hormone in our bodies, and it also helps with the conversion of the T4 to T3, which is our thyroid hormones, which will also influence our ovarian hormones. So we're only talking about the sex hormones today, but as you know, there are so many hormones in our bodies that actually need to work together. So vitamin D, and most, if not all of us are deficient. I obviously measure it in a blood test, and we aim for a value of about 50 to 70. So if my patients are deficient and they cannot go and sit in the sun for an hour every day, then I do supplement. I also find magnesium to be really helpful because it's quite calming, it's relaxing, and we have different forms of magnesium depending on what the symptoms is. Is it because she's struggling with sleep? Is it because she's struggling with her gut health? Is it because she gets some cramps? Then we can either use glycinate, threonate, all the different forms of magnesium that's available. And like I said, fiber. Fiber is one of the most important helps, natural remedies that we can use to help regulate and get the excess hormones out of the body. If it's not being used, we need to get rid of it.
Absolutely. And I think that segues really nicely into the next question I had around how we can support our menstrual cycle either through some nutrients or supplements or natural remedies. And we'll get to some of the red flags that women should look out for. But if someone is experiencing a relatively normal menstrual cycle, but maybe has some issues of bloating or cramping or PMS, what things could that woman potentially look out for and try?
Okay, firstly, I would love to know from her in which stage of a cycle does she have most of the symptoms, because then we can obviously link it to either estrogen that's too much or progesterone that's too little. I don't like the term estrogen dominance. It's a misnomer. It just means that there's too much estrogen in relation to progesterone at a certain point in the cycle. So obviously, if they've got very heavy periods, long periods, a lot of pain, it might be that there's too much inflammation in the body. So looking, like I said, to the anti-inflammatory foods, the omega-3, maybe taking an omega-3 supplement. I love the herb chasteberry or Angus castus. It's one of the most researched natural supplements, and it really doesn't interact with any medication. And it's been really helpful in my patients that either has too short of a cycle or struggle to get their progesterone high enough in the second part of their cycle. It really helps to regulate, but it's not something that I would go to the shop, just buy it and drink it irrespectively. It's most helpful if you can work with a practitioner or talk to somebody that's well versed in female hormones to really guide you on what supplements can help you. And then obviously a multivitamin is, I'm not saying go and have a multivitamin every day for the rest of your life, but our food sources nowadays unfortunately is depleted of vitamins and minerals because it's been grown in soil that is really depleted, and sometimes the apple we eat today has been lying in a fridge in a warehouse for 5 months already. So the sad truth of the food we eat today is that it is depleted of a lot of the minerals and vitamins that we need. And as I've discussed earlier, a lot of the minerals that really support our menstrual cycle is magnesium, zinc, selenium, specifically our B vitamins, B6, B9, B12. And we need that to really produce and make healthy hormones. So sometimes by just incorporating either more food groups, because women are oftentimes not eating enough of certain food groups or completely cutting out certain food groups. So first and foremost, I use food and tracking the cycle, and only then will I add the vitamins and minerals, and only then will I go over to some of these supplements, and only then will we consider actual hormone replacement if needed. And women often ask me, but doctor, I feel something's off in my hormones, can you please test my hormones? That's also quite, I don't want to say controversial topic, but again, if she doesn't track her cycle, how do I know where she is? Because we know at a certain point in our cycle what the hormones should be, but if she has no idea, is she on day 3, is she on day 14, is she on day 21, how will I be able to tell what's happening? So if she has a more or less regular cycle and we know where she is, then I will use certain days to test for certain hormones. And then we can really go into the detail of what's really needed. But oftentimes in my patients that still have, I want to say often have cycles, not necessarily regularly have cycles, I do not use a blood test to diagnose their menstrual problems, except if I suspect something like polycystic ovarian syndrome, because we do have certain measures and other hormones apart from our sex hormones that are really helpful in testing.
And I think that's really important to highlight, right? That this is quite individual, and no supplement is going to work for everyone, and you don't just have to go and grab all these things. And you know, if someone is telling you that one product is going to solve all your menstrual issues, you probably shouldn't buy it, right?
Yes.
So that's really key. If we just maybe touch on some of those things that are red flags when, you know, someone should go and see a medical practitioner because they have certain symptoms in their cycle. Could you highlight some of those things?
Definitely. Like we've explained now what a normal regular cycle should be like, and a normal bleed should be between, like I said, 1 to 5 days. It can go up to 8 days, but it should really start getting much less from day 5. If you have a heavy menstrual bleed that lasts for 8 days or longer, then I would really advise you to go and seek advice, because obviously iron deficiency anemia is something that we see quite often, because if you bleed every month and you lose, it's not a lot of blood that we lose, but because we menstruate every month, it all adds up. So excessive bleeding that's more than 8 days would definitely warrant some investigation. Completely irregular cycles, skipped cycles for 3 or 4 months in the reproductive years before perimenopause needs to be checked out. A girl that hasn't started her period by age, I want to say 15, 16, should definitely have it checked out. And then also if you have symptoms like we know, we put into this class of polycystic ovarian syndrome, hair growth in areas that women don't normally experience hair growth. It's on the chin and the cheek, around the nipples or on the belly area, or excessive acne. And then also, like we talked about mental health, if you experience severe mood changes and depressive disorders and thoughts that you're not supposed to have in that week before your period, please have it checked out, because premenstrual dysphoric disorder is a psychiatric classification and it needs to be worked up and be distinguished from just normal PMS. So you can add if I missed something, but those to me are some of the most common things we see that we really need to. A menstrual cycle should not keep you from doing your activities of daily living. A normal menstrual cycle should not prevent you from going to school. A normal menstrual cycle should not have you have to cancel your plans because you need to stay home because your symptoms are so severe. Then you need to have your cycle checked out with somebody to guide you on what you can do and or change in your habits to have a more, I don't want to say normal cycle, a more regular and a more common cycle.
Yeah. That's incredibly useful just to have those guidelines. I wouldn't add anything. I think you've covered all the bases on those. And it's exactly that. You know, if your cycle is impacting your ability to function in your day-to-day life, then you need to have it looked at and you need to investigate a little bit further.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Ledivia, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise and knowledge with us on this topic. I know that there's going to be so many listeners that have benefited from this.
It's a great pleasure, Tracy, and thank you for
very
all the
much.
wonderful questions.
You're welcome. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us. I hope that you found this episode informative and encouraging. Remember, your menstrual cycle is a normal part of your day-to-day life, and with the right information and support, you can navigate it confidently. If you'd like to learn more, check out our resources and links in the description below, and stay tuned for more Smulcast episodes. Until next time, keep living a healthier and fuller life.